Welcome to the 116th edition of Spooky Reviews from Spooky Ventures. This time around I'm looking at a Blu-Ray release of a film called The Black Mass. Now before you get the wrong idea, this is not a supernatural horror movie. Instead it is about a serial killer, and the term Black Mass comes from a description of one of the victims. I'm not really sure I'd consider this a horror movie, although it has some definite horrific scenes. There's a lot of tension at play throughout. It seems to be sort of a psychological study that has some really creepy elements. It's based on true events, which I'll get to later because it does contain spoilers. This movie follows a serial killer over the course of a day in his life. It takes place in January of 1978. Some of the movie is shot from his perspective, as if you were looking through his eyes. Nearly all of the rest of it focuses entirely on the scene around him. In other words, although you aren't seeing from his eyes in those scenes, you are seeing only his area. They avoid showing his face directly a lot of the time, at least completely. But you do get glimpses here and there. Much of this movie is slow burn, yet it's also fascinating and downright creepy. There are a couple technical issues. For one thing, the dialogue is hard to hear in the bar scene. Some of the dark scenes are so dark that it's hard to see what's going on. Beyond that, I have to wonder if on some level this can be seen as glorifying a serial killer. Now, there isn't a lot happening other than menace for a lot of the film. The switch to the violent part is very abrupt. It's also very brutal. That's even more true when you realize it's based on true events. Now, before I get to the spoilers, I should mention that the disc doesn't include a lot of bonus features. In fact, since those are just things like movie trailers, I don't really think they are much of a draw at all. Then again, I always say that the actual movie tends to be the main draw for buying a disc. It's definitely the part you are likely to watch the most. I mentioned that there are going to be some spoilers, and it's time for that. So, if you don't want those spoilers, you should turn the video off now. I'll give you a little bit of time here, but please shut this video off if you don't want to hear the spoilers. Now, I'm going to assume that if you're still with me, you are perfectly fine with spoilers. I know that in general, I don't mind spoilers, but this time around I'm glad that I didn't know what I found out at the end. So on with that information now. The movie says it's inspired by true events. So many times that means some vague connection. For instance, the fact that most crazy killer movies are based very loosely on Ed Gein. Well, the connection here is a lot more detailed and factual, but they made a special effort to keep that information strictly in the end of the movie, and I think it's more of a statement to find it out that way after you've seen what happened. Once the film is done, they reveal that the killer we've been watching is none other than Ted Bundy. I got that feeling when he was referred to as Ted a couple times, but I really wasn't sure. They spell it out with some title cards and footage at the end. Let me just say that I'm not one of those serial killer people who knows all the history of the various murderers. Obviously, I knew about Bundy, but didn't know the details. So, once the movie was over, I looked him up on Wikipedia, and the events in the movie happened. Well, at least the facts that actually happened are presented here. We can't really see inside Bundy's head, and perhaps some of this stuff is just conjecture, but there's enough basis in fact to make this much more chilling. And they also show some things that are what he's supposedly seeing. Again, we can't be sure that that's what was going on in his head. It is obvious from the way this is presented that Bundy was a mentally ill person. He's seen here as someone who is incredibly dangerous, with a sense that he can go off at any moment. That is chilling. Once again, I do have some worries about the effect of this movie on some viewers, and perhaps its motivation. It's not a fun movie in any way. It's dark, twisted, and brutal. Those things are more impactful when you realize how close to the real facts this comes. It's not a movie that I'd recommend for everyone, but it is unique and powerful. Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.